So welcome everyone who's here. Today is the first urban forest seminar for this year, and we will have the chance to listen to Mattias Qviström. Very welcome to you, who is a professor in landscape architecture, especially spatial planning at SLU in Uppsala. His talk has the title Urban Forests for a Welfare Society, Running and the Forest Ideal in Swedish Recreational Planning. And Mattias's research focuses on the interplay between planning and the everyday landscape, with historical and ethnographic landscape studies as a base. And this presentation that he's giving today is based on one of his ongoing projects called the Welfare Landscape Reassembled. I thought I should just give you a short background on the organizers of this webinar. Let's see if I can just click my way forward. There. So this webinar series, Urban Forests, is given by SLU Urban Futures and Future Forests. And we are two out of 4 future platforms at SLU who are, we have the mission to promote transdisciplinary research, education, and collaboration for a sustainable future within 4 different overarching themes. And we also work with improving collaboration between researchers and society. And Future Forests then is a platform for interdisciplinary forest research, collaboration, and research communication. And they are located in Umeå. And the program is a collaboration between SLU, Umeå University, and Skogforsk. And the SLU Urban Futures, who are located in Alnarp in Skåne, is a strategic platform that develops and strengthens transdisciplinarity research, education, and collaboration in sustainable urban development. This seminar series, which we collaborate on, has been running since last semester. And we have now made a little web page where you can also view the previous seminars. So if you're interested in urban forests in general, then please log in and watch previous seminars as well. And we will also put up the seminars underways this semester. So just some short reminders before I hand over to Mattias is to please turn off your microphones during his talk. I should also say that we'll film the presentation part of the meeting. So if you don't want to be seen on video, keep your cameras and sound off. And we will not, after Mattias's presentation, there will be a Q&A session. So we'll not film that. We will not film the Q&A session, so you know. And if you have questions, we're very happy to have them, but please save them to the end. Just raise your hand in Zoom or write them in the chat. And I think that's it, so I'll just hand over to Mattias then.
Thank you, Tove, and thank you very much for the invitation to give this talk. I will try to share my screen now. Let's hope it works. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. We had some technical issues before, so right. So this is my title for the presentation: Urban Forests for a Welfare Society. I'm going to use running as a case, but I'm going to primarily focus on how this recreational planning from the welfare society fosters a certain forest ideal. And the importance of this legacy today. And as Tove said, this is a presentation which is part of the ongoing research project, the Welfare Landscape Reassembled, and it's primarily based on my research. It's a bigger project, but I draw primarily on my own research in this presentation. Nothing happens. Here we go. Good. So this is, I'd like to take as a point of departure an urban forest in Uppsala. This is one of several urban forests in Uppsala that are currently challenged by urban densification with the new compact city ideal as a threat to these kind of legacies from the 60s and 70s. And we see that all over Sweden today. We are currently doing a study of municipal planning in the 20 largest municipalities of Sweden. And we see very clearly that, I mean, densification is going on everywhere, but especially this kind of green spaces from the 60s and 70s are really challenged in contemporary planning. And they are seen as not very valuable. They are just deemed as a matter of quantity, not quality. They are empty, just vast empty spaces, that kind of language. And so they are replaced with very compact green spaces and a more urban morphology in general. What we miss when we do this is the legacy of the welfare society, we argue in this project. We argue that these places are actually part and parcel of the development of a welfare society, of a welfare planning in the 60s and 70s. And by understanding them in this historical context, then we might see other values and other potentials, and other potential future for urban development, perhaps. So this is what I'm going to argue in this presentation. I'm going to give you a glimpse into the history of recreational planning in Sweden, which in effect, the recreational planning in the 60s and 70s was in effect a green planning also. Then just briefly show how it was challenged in the 80s and 90s, and discuss, you know, the potentials to use this history in order to reinterpret the value of these spaces today. So recreational planning, the 1960s and 70s was really a golden age for leisure and recreational planning in Sweden, but also in large parts of Europe, certainly in the Scandinavian countries, but also Central Europe, Eastern Europe, possibly other parts of Europe and Northern America too. And just to give you one number, in 1961, the municipalities in Sweden spent 100 million Swedish crowns on leisure. 1981 spent 5,000 million kronor on leisure. Obviously, this is a time where administration boomed in general, but this is exceptional. This is a massive increase in investments in leisure. And not the least than recreational facilities. So during this period, we see a rapid expansion of recreational facilities and green space, because the green space played a very important role in these facilities, for these facilities in the 60s and 70s, followed by a stagnation in the 80s. So it's a rapid expansion and then just as rapid decline. So it's a very specific period, which is very important for our contemporary green space. Yeah, so the result is an impressive but partly forgotten and seasoned infrastructure for leisure and recreation. And as I started by saying, this is really invisible in the contemporary debates on urban densification. So why this development? Well, if we go back to the late 1950s, we see rapid urbanization, which of course continued in the 60s and 70s. By that time, we had the highest number of cars per capita in Europe. We had an increased sedentary lifestyle, and this goes for work life as well as leisure. You know, the introduction of TV and so on, more office works, which led to a rapid increase in lifestyle diseases such as heart attacks. And this was really big issue at the time. They didn't know why this happened, because the idea within the cardiology at the time was that if you were older, That is, if you were, say, 40, you should take it easy to preserve your health, right? This leads to a paradigm shift in the 1950s, where the cardiologists realized that, well, actually the heart is a muscle too. It needs exercise. We need everyday exercise in order to stay fit in the welfare society, to combat these lifestyle diseases. So this becomes a very important matter as part of the welfare society. In addition to this, the concern for lifestyle and health marries also a strong belief in the leisure society, meaning a strong belief that we will get more leisure time in the future. Leisure will be even more important for our lifestyle, and so on. So we need to plan accordingly. But also with, as I said, emerging welfare ambitions within planning in combination with modernist planning legacies. I won't go that much into the modernist legacy here. I will more talk about this recreational planning and how it developed, and this paradigm shift in way of looking at the need for recreational activities to combat lifestyle diseases as part of the welfare society. And then the one activity that really stands out here is running, recreational running. This is the recreational activity that's invented at the time in order to combat lifestyle diseases. Other activities matters too, of course, but this is really what is in focus in much of the planning. And this is a picture of a runner in the early 1960s somewhere in Sweden, and I think it's quite telling. If we can imagine this elderly man going for a run a decade earlier, people would probably have worried for his mental health and his physical health. You simply didn't go running at his age, and it was really it would have been bad for your health at that time. So it's a huge paradigm shift where this is marketed for people in general, all ages, and no matter of their previous health. Take a look at his clothes. He doesn't have this kind of running clothes that we think relates to runners. This is a new activity, and they didn't really have that kind of equipment. Look, especially at his shoes. He's wearing rubber boots. That was actually recommended at the time. So this is prior to the kind of running boots or running shoes that we relate to recreational running. And most importantly of all, look at the environment. He's running in the forest, and he's running probably on a trail specifically designed for running and skiing at this time. So this is a novel thing which develops as part of the welfare society. And I cannot tell you the entire story of recreational running here. I'm happy to do that in another lecture. But it starts in 1958 with a pilot project in Gävle. And it's a collaboration. It's based on a collaboration between cardiologists and the Swedish Ski and Outdoor Association, Friluftsfrämjandet. And this combination is really important here. They see the need. The Swedish Ski and Outdoor Association say explicitly that we need to invent a new sport, a new recreational sport. And they want, of course, to get people out in the forest, but they also want to make a contribution to the welfare society in a way. So they invent this idea of running based on models from the cardiologists. So it's an idea of a combination of running, visiting outdoor gym, and occasionally doing fitness tests of various kinds. This goes well. So it expands. In 1963, they launched a nationwide campaign with very important support from insurance companies. 1971, this becomes adopted by the Environmental Protection Agency, and they developed national guidelines and national support. In 1987, we have at least 4,000 fitness trails in Sweden. So this is a remarkable development. a remarkable success, I would say. I mean, it was a brand new activity in 1958, and 1987 we have, these kind of fitness or running trails everywhere. This is a poster from the early 1960s explaining the kind of recreational centers that they imagine as a support for recreational running, but also for other kind of recreational activities, of course. Notice the illuminated running trail going around with the outdoor gym in the middle, and then this rustic hut with showers and sauna and so on, a cafe, but also facilities for fitness tests with medical doctors coming there. So this is the model. I think what you can clearly see here is this ideological cocktail. This is a matter of a medical and scientific focus on pulse and rhythms, importance to combat welfare diseases, but it's also a very strong forest or nature ideal, which goes very much in the tradition of the Swedish Ski and Outdoor Association and the going back to the 19th century and the idea of hiking in the forest and so on. And this idea and this ideological cocktail would really follow along with the expansion of this kind of recreational facilities and recreational planning in the 60s and 70s. So when we come to 1971 and the first national guidelines developed by the Environmental Protection Agency, we still have this recreational forest as a center for recreational activities. Again, the illuminated running trail, the outdoor gym, the changing room, and then in the background you see A city, B village, and a long road with a big parking space next to the facility. I mean, this is part of the welfare society is also a car society, right? This is the planning of the 60s and 70s. So these kind of recreational regional recreational centers were very much embedded in the car culture too. But as this expands, not only this kind of regional recreational centers were developed, but also local ones. So each municipality developed their own recreational center, and I've had a look especially at Malmö, because Malmö is interesting. The municipality doesn't have any forests, so what do you do with this kind of forest ideal or nature ideal? Well, what they do, as you can see in this slide, they actually established the first 2 recreational facilities in Bokskogen, the beech forest, which is not within the municipality, but on a cars drive to the neighboring municipality. So they didn't let go of this nature ideal at all, even though they didn't have forest. I think it tells something about how strong this ideal was in the recreational planning at the time. Now, the next step was to provide this kind of facilities on a city district level. And then what happens with the forest ideal and nature ideal? Well, I think this national report says a lot about what they had in mind. It states that in our country, nature is a priceless asset for play, exercise, relaxation, outdoor leisure, and so on. But nature is not accessible to everyone. In order to turn exercise into a natural part of each and one's lifestyle pattern, there's a need for areas of nature complemented with simple facilities for exercise. A forested area in the neighborhood is the easiest, cheapest, and perhaps best place for play and recreation. So this very strong focus on the forest as the base for recreational facilities of recreation followed suit all the way down to the urban planning, to the understanding of the neighborhood. And we can see that very clearly in the planning of Malmö too. This is a recreational plan from 1978 or 79, where they planned for this kind of recreational facilities or running tracks in each and every city district, aligned with forested areas or parks as long as possible. If not, then along the coast in still green areas along the water. And I think this captures quite nicely both how these ideas of nature, but also spatial justice materializes as part of the welfare planning in Malmö. And spatial justice because it's this idea that it should be accessible to everyone on an everyday basis. This is the local facilities, then you might need a bus or a car to go to the next level, so to say. So this planning happens on the city district level, on the municipal level, on a regional level or intermunicipal level, but also on a national level. 25 national recreational centers are designated in the 1970s, and this is one of them. This is the one closest to Malmö then, Sydvästskånska sjölandskapet, with ample support from the Environmental Protection Agency for developing this as a recreational resource. Last but not least, this welfare planning, this green planning, was very much also a matter of organizing campaigns and courses. So this poster is part of the spring campaign for walking and running. And as you can see in the picture, they targeted all ages, all kind of bodies, so to speak. It has nothing to do with competition whatsoever. It's just a matter of participation. And of course, it's framed in this idea or ideal of being outdoors in nature or in the forest. But also, the municipalities and the Outdoor Association and others organized courses. So there were courses for how to run. And obviously, if you organize a course on how to run, it's also where to run. So to sum this up, an infrastructure for welfare developed as part of this recreational planning. And now I focus on running still when trying to do this list of different actors and places that were assembled into this infrastructure. It consists of floodlit trails, exercise centers, outdoor gyms, and so on, but also of courses for coaches and others to plan and maintain these kind of exercise centers. And then courses, as I just mentioned, for running, for beginners, fitness test with medical doctors, volunteering, economic support from governmental bodies, various government bodies, local municipalities, insurance companies, and others. And then outdoor recreation, and especially the forest, was understood as the arena for this, not sport, not the stadium. It was a very clear distinction between these. So this is infrastructure, and my interpretation is that there's really a very strong narrative that frames this planning in the 1960s and especially 70s. A strong narrative that we need to work for physical activity, or we need to facilitate physical activity. The forest is a given place for that. It has nothing to do with sport. It's part of developing a welfare society. It requires planning. And all the different actors agree upon this general narrative. That's why they buy into it, whether it's the Environmental Protection Agency or the insurance companies or the orienteering club or the local municipality or medical doctors or cardiologists and so on. So they all agree upon this story, and that's why it's so successful in the 60s and 70s. And what happens in the 80s then is that this narrative becomes questioned, and it very quickly falls apart because it gets questioned from many different many different actors starts to question this alignment, so to say. Very abstract argument, and I'm going to illustrate it again with the case of running. Because this is what happens in 1979. In 1978-79, the American idea of jogging becomes imported to Europe and in many different countries, jogging and the idea of city marathon as a twin. And it gets picked up in Sweden in spring 1979 by Korpen, I don't know how to translate that into English, but also by various sport organizations that want to market city marathons. So this leads to heated debate. Why do we need this new idea of running? We already have running. Now, it might not be obvious that this would challenge the old story of recreational planning, but take a look at this picture of a runner at the shores of Chicago. This is everything that the Swedish recreational runner was not. It's an urban environment. It's not a soft surface. It's not an undulating path. It's not planned for. It's not, there isn't a tree in sight, and so on. It's running on asphalt. It's a break from the idea of nature, but actually it's a new nature idea too, because they talk a lot about running being natural. It's about the body, the movement of the body. It's the natural thing. Where it happens doesn't matter. That's their argument. It's about individualism. You can run everywhere. It's for strong individuals making their own paths wherever they live. It's related to sport, especially city marathon, not outdoor recreation. It's market-driven development, and it's another bodily ideal. It's much stronger focus on slim and young bodies. And as a result of this new paradigm, this new understanding of running, there is no need for planning, and there's no need for urban forest because you can run anywhere. That's the motto of jogging. You can run anywhere, and you can do it yourself. The only thing you need is a pair of good shoes. And this is precisely what happens. Just 1 or 2 years after this, this becomes accepted in Swedish planning in a way that, okay, we don't need to plan for this anymore. So the economic support disappears. The courses arranged for management and planning, this kind of facilities disappears. The Outdoor Recreation Association doesn't want to have anything to do with this anymore because this is sport and this is urban. They leave the welfare project. They really marginalize themselves. The Environmental Protection Agency gets a new role, a much more marginalized role in relation to recreation, partly because of this, because they don't deal with sport and they don't deal with the urban environment. Obviously, this kind of sportification happens with other recreational activities, not just running. So we're left with this kind of ruins. I mean, everything crumbles within just a few years of this previous infrastructure for recreational planning. This is me doing an archaeological excavation of an old outdoor gym, and I use that as a kind of metaphor because we see these ruins also in terms of planning and management. We've done several interviews with municipal employees working with outdoor recreation and running trails and so on, and they have no guidelines to follow because the last guideline was made in 1978 and they've never heard of it, and so on. So this entire structure just crumbles in a very short time. So what comes instead then? Well, it takes a few years, and then we get a new paradigm, the green structure planning. What's interesting with the green structure planning, I've just published a paper about this shift. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I've soon used up my time. But one very important thing is that it really establishes or cements this divide, this conceptual divide between sport, leisure, and physical activity on one side and green planning on the other side. In the original investigations about green structure, where they conceptualize the idea of green structure. They write explicitly that this is about bringing in urban ecology, bringing in therapeutic aspects and play and cultural heritage and so on into understanding the morphology of green space. But they set aside active recreation, sport, sorry, I was muted. So in the development of the green structure planning, the sport, leisure, and physical activity facilities are really set aside because, as I say, that's already settled. That's already taken care of. Right? So in the 1990s, actually, there was a very good infrastructure already. The places were already there, the running paths and also other things were already there. So they didn't have to think about that when conceptualizing this new idea of green structure planning. And fair enough, that makes sense in the mid 1990s, but it doesn't make sense today. And what happened is precisely that we got this even stronger divide between leisure, sport, physical activity on one side and urban planning for green space on the other. So back to the urban forest in Uppsala, I would argue that this is also some kind of ruin of a welfare landscape, but we can re-establish it. We can try to bring back these stories and these different actors that made up the welfare planning. We can try to reconnect with recreational organization to think about this as a facility for health and well-being in another way that is done today. And I think this is where the history can be inspiring to see what kind of activity, what kind of stakeholders has been involved in the history. But of course, we shouldn't just repeat history, we should think ahead. So in conclusion, the history provides an understanding of the key role of urban forestry for the welfare society and of its complex geography and the vast numbers of stakeholders involved in this planning. And this opens up for a discussion on how to develop a welfare landscape for the 21st century by re-establishing some of the alignments that made the welfare planning so successful. I also have some references here, but I think I just stop sharing now. So thank you for listening.